With historic storms in the Maritimes and record-breaking temperatures in the West making headlines across Canada, tonight we're putting the spotlight on two of the country's most recognizable environmentalists. For decades, David Suzuki educated Canadians on the state of the world on the CBC's The Nature of Things. He's since retired and now working with his foundation, along with his daughter Severn, the executive director. The two of them, that is, joined us from our Vancouver newsroom for a wide-ranging conversation. Joining me now, David Suzuki and his daughter, Severn Cullis-Suzuki. Welcome to both of you. So good to see you. What a treat to talk to both of you at the same time. And David, let me just tell you, I saw you years ago. I think when I was in university, you were riding the subway in Toronto and you're just reading the newspaper very quietly to yourself. And I looked over and I thought to myself, there's David Suzuki on the subway. It was a very interesting moment for me. But I have to ask you, how is retirement treating you?
Great. I love it because now I can turn to being a full-time grandpa. And I've been trying to help Sarika out, who's now a co-host of The Nature of Things. And I told her, whenever you're filming for The Nature of Things, I'll take your place for the kids. And it's been great.
That's lovely. And I wanted to ask you about Sarika, actually, because, last spring you retired after 44 years hosting the show. Was it 44 years? It's pretty incredible. Why was it so important to you to hand the torch over and make sure that The Nature of Things continue on? Well,
because the nature of things is the important thing. I happen to be privileged to have spent all that time being the host, but as I said at my farewell at the CBC in Toronto, the thing we're celebrating is that this long-running show has been so important for Canadians, and it is going to go on. And that's just the nature of life, We all go through the time, and then your time's over. But carry on the program.
Severn, your dad said that, he had stayed on that program for as long as he did because he worried that the program would be canceled. What do you think the impact of The Nature of Things has been, and why do you think that show needs to stay on the air?
Well, a lot of us grew up watching The Nature of Things, and it just blows me away now working at the David Suzuki Foundation as executive director. When I mention David's name, so many people say they grew up with The Nature of Things. And so having a show that focused on science, but not only science, the meaningful, important issues of our times has really shaped generations of people, of Canadians. I think that is so important. So it's just so wonderful that the show is continuing on. And it's amazing for us to have a family member who's continuing on the role of hosting.
Yeah. But Travis, one of the things that when I was with The Nature of Things, there were a lot of companies and people that wanted to get me off air. And the show was always accused of being biased, and I claim its bias proudly. Yes, The Nature of Things is biased, as are most of the other programs that are on air. The Nature of Things bias is that Mother Earth, our biosphere, is the source of our lives and our well-being, and that it should be our highest priority to care for and protect. And that's considered biased. So I wear that bias very proudly, and I look forward to The Nature of Things continuing to present that to Canadians.
I want to rewind a little bit, actually a lot here, and I want to play a clip of a conversation that you had back in the 70s about your concerns for the world at that time, David.
What bothers me is that in a world that's becoming extremely complex, in which the environment in many ways is being ravished very rapidly, rather than trying to recover our good environment, our clean air and clean water and so on, we may begin to say, well, let's adapt man to the noxious gases in the air and the dirty water.
So I want you to unpack that a little for me, what you meant then, and if you think those concerns have now become a reality.
Well, it definitely is a reality. When you load yourselves up with various toxins that come from the the environment, we end up, oh, we've got to treat that, and we've got to find a new drug that will do this. I always said, you know, I'm a geneticist, so my big worry was that we're going to try to introduce genes into us that will, for example, if we build up mercury in our bodies, well, why not make a pill with a bacterium that needs mercury? So you take the pill, the bacterium will go through your system, eating our mercury, and one day you get a pimple and go pop, and out comes the mercury. We've got to stop acting that way. We've got to realize that, you know, the air, the water, the source, the food that comes from the soil, that's what allows us to be who we are. And rather than trashing it and then dealing with the consequences in ourselves, we've got to protect it and maintain the purity of it. And I think I'm astounded to hear a clip 50 years old.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was right on.
It was right on. And Severn, let me ask you, if you think it ever gets exhausting for your father, you know, you heard that clip from the 70s where he's trying to warn people about, you know, the dangers of what is happening with our environment. Do you think it has gotten exhausting for him to keep beating that drum?
Well, obviously.
Yeah.
I mean, look at him.
He looks good. He's looking good.
Yeah, no, he looks great. And I have to say, it's his passion that has kept him youthful. It's actually pretty incredible. He has a message and he wants to get it out to the world. I mean, I'm exhausted at this message as well. And especially, you know, like I've been an activist my entire life. And you know, we're looking at this last year. It was 2023, warmest year by far in human memory, but also probably in the last 125,000 years. And this was all predicted. You know, it's happening faster than what was predicted. But, you know, as you can hear from that clip, I mean, environmental ills have been on the horizon a long time, and then whoop, now they're not on the horizon, but we've had the science for so long. So I think the one thing that I can say is David's constant reiteration of what is happening in the big picture in our world has actually contributed to the point we are now, which is I think there's a huge difference of awareness than there was even 10 years ago, because people know that something is fundamentally wrong and we have to change.
You know, as she says, she was an activist from the time you were about 5. I think you had your first little conference there. Anyway, when she grew up and got married and said, "Dad, I'm pregnant," I was going, "Oh my God, Sev, you've lived with what's happening all your life. You know what you're doing." And her answer at that time blew me away, because I think it's got to be the solution. She said, "Dad, this is my commitment to the earth. This is my commitment to a future. When I have a child, you don't think I'm going to fight like mad for the future of my child?" And I think every parent, every grandparent, if you look at it that way, then it seems to me we've got no choice. That's got to be the impetus that really drives us. And it's not going to be easy today, but it's got to drive us.
And Severn, I know, to pick up on what your dad was saying, I know that actually you really, and you've talked about this in interviews before, you really struggled with that decision as to whether or not to have children. And that is a conversation which is going on right now with this generation, whether or not they actually want to have kids because of the environment. What do you make of the fact that that is actually a real conversation that some people are having?
I think it's a huge indication. I mean, we're scientists here, and you have to pay attention to the data. Pay attention to what that is saying about the state of Western civilization right now, where the younger people who are young adults thinking about continuing on their species are actually considering not continuing on because of what the science, what the data, what the future looks like. We have got to wake up and pay attention to that. That is crucial data and information. And if we as a society don't ask the big questions, like, what is the goal here? Where are we going towards? Are we just, is profit, is endless is endless economic growth. Is that actually the goal when our youth, our young people are saying, I don't want to bring children into this world? I mean, that's an indictment, and we have to pay attention to that very message.
I want to play a clip of you when you were, I don't think even a teenager yet, at the United Nations. I'm sure you've seen this clip many times, but I just want to show it to the audience here.
You don't know how to bring back an animal now extinct, and you can't bring back the forest that once grew where there is now a desert. If you don't know how to fix it, please stop breaking it.
That speech, garnered worldwide attention. Greta Thunberg was there generations later, making the same plea. Does that make you angry, David? And I mean, what do you think it will take to get people to listen to the message?
If we don't listen to our children, as Seb says, that's an indictment of who we are, of our society. If we can't listen to their words and take them seriously. Before Sev, there were other Gretas and Sevs, and
Absolutely.
they've been saying this now for generations. What does it take?
And young people have always been on the forefront of revolutions. We have to listen to those truth tellers because they have everything at stake. What I want to just challenge us all to think about is the fact that we actually are seeing people, communities, municipalities who are taking up this call. We're actually in 2024 seeing transformative change that is happening not only in Canada but around the world. We're seeing people divest from fossil fuels. We're seeing communities organize and innovators, entrepreneurs build renewable energy projects. We're seeing all kinds of answers and solutions. And this is one of the reasons I'm so excited to work at the David Suzuki Foundation, is because we're focused on the solutions. How do we survive this bottleneck that we are currently in? And if you peel down a layer beneath the international leaders level, you can see incredible progress that's being made. So I think at the community level, people are listening and they are transforming. And the trick is for us to fight against the fossil fuel era and industry that's not going to go down lightly, obviously, and keep that momentum and just scale that up. And if we do, we will absolutely see the transformation we need.
One of the challenges is that we look to politics, we elect people to look out for our future, and they get caught up in the political process itself, and that prevents them from seeing what the problems are. I mean, take a classic example. In 2008, when Carol James was head of the NDP in British Columbia, Gordon Campbell, a conservative, had brought in a carbon tax. And the NDP decided axe the tax was a good way to get reelected. Well, cut ahead now. And what do we have? We have a Liberal government that brought in a carbon tax, the carbon tax that was started in BC, now applying. And guess what? A Conservative is now saying axe a tax. So as long as we leave these things and let them be political issues, we're not going to come together. We've got to act as if we're in a war where we have no choice. Or as we saw with COVID, now we've got a challenge and we've got to all act together and make it our highest priority to deal with that.
I want to ask you about the carbon tax, though. Do you think that Canada's current carbon pricing is sufficient? Do you think it is a strategy that will work?
No, definitely. I mean, it's necessary, and I'm very pleased that Gordon Campbell started that in British Columbia, the first one in North America. But at that time, the Swedes were already applying a carbon tax of the order of $160 a ton. And ours was $30 or $35 a ton, and it's only up around $50 now. No, I mean, it's an absolutely necessary tool, but it must be much higher. And we've got to just start regulating and saying, no more of this, no more commitment to infrastructure for an industry or fossil fuels that we've got to get off. So
how do you do that, Severn? I mean, obviously there are political realities for any federal leader, for any
Absolutely.
provincial leader that they have to deal with. I know that, you know, the carbon targets that we have set, the emissions targets that is, have not been met.
No, not at all.
How do you manage that? I mean, other than saying we've got to do better within that political sphere, because that is the reality, how do you manage all of that?
One of the things that I am finding useful for my own, you know, cognitive thinking when I'm trying to bring together the realities that 2023, you know, we saw 200,000 Canadians forced to leave their homes because of climate change induced fires, when we have the reality of climate change right at all of our doors. And at the same time, we're seeing us never meeting anything close to what is going to get us to deal with climate change appropriately. Like, we're just not meeting the scale, is to understand why. And if you look at all of the different forces that have promoted this current state of what is basically fossil fuel supremacy, meaning a state and a time where fossil fuel as an energy and an infrastructure is supreme. It dominates. It's accepted as the status quo and really being peddled as the only way. It really helps me to understand, well, you know, this is what we're trying to fight, and this is what is holding us back. That's why it's so hard. But I think that we really have to look at how do we make social change happen, and it has to have three prongs, three levels of work, and that's what the DSF, the David Suzuki Foundation, is doing. Yes, we're doing one at the policy level. We need that legislation. And this last year, we saw a lot of different elements put in place, the infrastructure to start regulating, just beginning. Of course, they have to be stronger, but we have to have something to begin with, so we can have some tool to getting to zero carbon emissions, which is the goal. And then we need that to be animated by community level engagement. We have to actually talk to our neighbors, talk to our families, talk to our workplace to make sure that we're starting to get ourselves off of fossil fuels, that we're starting to engage in the social transformation that must happen if we are to have a say in how bad climate change gets. We still have a chance to influence this, folks, but that means we have to jump into action. And then the final level is personally. We all have to divest from fossil fuels, and not just financially, but we actually have to just get ourselves off of this use of power.
Let me leave the last question with you, David. You have said before, you know, in your retirement, and even before that, you are free to speak your mind. What is your direct, frank message to the Prime Minister of the country right now?
Do the right thing. You know, you've got to now declare the end of the fossil fuel era. This has been our great energy source, but there are alternatives all over the place that are economically competitive. My feeling is it doesn't matter whether they're economically competitive or not. We've got to do it, because we can't keep spending the enormous amount of money propping up a sunset industry, and that sun's going to set very, very quickly. So the question is the future for your children and grandchildren, does that matter more than a short-term political issue of whether you're going to get reelected? And
we have the research to show that it is 100% possible for Canada to have a completely dependable, affordable, renewable energy grid by 2030. Like, we have that data. It's totally doable.
You got the last word there. Severn Suzuki, David Suzuki, certainly appreciate your time. So much more to discuss. I hope you do come back here on Canada Tonight.
Thank you.